just can't do it. How can I sit here, pretend to be some kind of well-informed host of a web show about video games when I'm just so bad at video games? Would you listen to someone who can't beat games that are clearly aimed at kids, and yet for some reason are surprisingly impossible to beat? Would you trust that man? I wouldn't trust anything or anyone ever again. Difficult video games are kinda everywhere nowadays. I'm not sure if that's because we've got an appetite for tricky games since Dark Souls is such a prominent part of our culture, but it seems like you can barely take 2 steps without tripping over a game that challenges your talents in uniquely crazy ways. Still though, it does surprise me when an innocent looking game is able to catch me off guard and be shockingly difficult for most of its playtime. I have no great aversion to challenging video games, but I usually like to know what I'm getting myself into so I can prepare myself for the hardships ahead. And there's plenty of that in my future away from video games, since as a 25-year-old man whose hairline is retreating faster than the speed of sound, I may well end up losing a lot of hair this decade, and seeing how 2 out of 3 guys are likely to share that same fate before they turn 35, it's a problem that needs solving. Luckily, we've got Keeps, who were kind enough to sponsor this video, who are working tirelessly to help restore hair to barren scalps, with numerous successful cases under their belt. Their FDA-approved treatment for hair loss can be shipped to your home, so you don't have to tackle any of the scary world we live in these days to retain your hair. And considering how cheap Keeps' treatment package is compared to their competitors, there really is no reason not to give your hair the care and attention it deserves. For a limited time offer, you can go to keeps.com/rabbid or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/rabbid to receive 50% off your first order. Stop hair loss now before it's too late. Alright, cool. It's time for some bullshit hard video games. It's gonna be stupid. Everyone remembers their first time playing a Super Monkey Ball game. You think, oh hey, this is fun. You're like this monkey in a ball and you roll around a level collecting bananas and then break through the finish line when you get bored, and everything feels so quaint and wonderful, like you haven't got a care in the world apart from how your new monkey friend is rattling around inside his ball and may end up with a ton of injuries by the end of all of this. Don't tell Peter, they'd probably have hundreds of pet monkeys killed in protest. Unsurprisingly, anyone with more than just a passing knowledge of Super Monkey Ball will be able to tell you how soul-crushingly hard these games become after just a few levels. As if the developers are holding fire for as long as they can before their true sadistic motivations erupt and consume an unsuspecting player's enjoyment of Monkey Ball. I didn't want any of that, I just find the monkeys cute, that's all. Monkey Ball goes brrrr. Oh fuck! It's hard to gauge how surprisingly tricky Super Monkey Ball games are at this point, because these games have been rolling around for a while now, and I think most people have acknowledged that they get a bit crazy at some point. But for me personally, I still can't get over how appealing these games are as a concept, and yet they just get crazy, kind of out of nowhere. The devs are assuming that at this point I'm kind of good at the game, but shockingly, I'm really not. I actually really appreciate that Super Monkey Ball goes in so absurdly hard with later levels. It is one way of respecting the player by slowly increasing the complexity of levels that they feel comfortable taking on, but the skill ceiling of Monkey Ball is way higher than I ever thought possible with such a simple looking game. The fact that the skill ceiling can be so high is a good sign that the devs have created a concept that can evolve into some truly terrifying prospects, but it'll still teach you a lot about assuming how a game will develop based on its visual design. I'd argue that Monkey Ball wouldn't be anywhere near as memorable as it is today if it didn't gradually become this horrendous trial that forces you to treat this game differently and one day become this god of manipulating momentum in just the right way so you can reach all these platforms. It's a steep curve for sure, but you reach the end of it incredibly overqualified for the average Monkey Ball levels, so I suppose it wasn't for nothing. At least all those monkeys died for a reason. Not everyone enjoys difficult video games. That's not really what this video is about, but I think there's at least a bit of a through line with some people not liking a game because it's a lot more challenging than they expected. It's not completely crazy to suggest that some people just want something simple to play. And when you're living in the 1980s and looking for something fun and exciting for your Atari 2600, you may well have bought E.T. with some hope that it might be just like the film and you'd be touching fingers and flying across the moon on a bike, and yet crucially, this would all be a happy good time that you'd want to tell your friends about. As opposed to what history now recognizes as one of the most destructive video games ever made that helped to bring down an entire industry. You try doing that nowadays, you might find it surprisingly difficult. Did you get it? Did you like my joke? Was it a really good joke? Anyway, so E.T. was a bit of an infamous disaster that cost a lot of money to put into action and even more to offset the losses of when no one climbed aboard Atari's sinking ship, but no one seems to talk about how surprisingly difficult this game is. Not that I think Atari was ever going for something like that, but when you're busy making one of the worst games of all time, things just tend to happen by accident most of the time. E.T. is a great game to play if you want to feel like nothing you've done has ever mattered or will ever matter in the future. The nihilistic self-loathing is just part of the territory of a game as aggressively terrible as this, but E.T. is very good at rendering everything you do fairly pointless because Howard Warshaw had 5.5 weeks to scramble this game together. He got an all-expensive paid trip to Hawaii out of it, as well as a whole bundle of money, so at least someone got something out of this game, but the product that he left behind is surprisingly tricky given its reputation. People always talk about how terrible E.T. is, but they often neglect to mention how ass-backwards the core gameplay loop is. You need to assemble a phone to do all that phoning home that I've heard so much about, but the 3 pieces are randomly scattered inside these pits that are really hard to get out of since E.T. has to be in a specific location for you to be able to levitate out of them. Plus, E.T. has a nasty habit of tumbling into a pit if even one of his pixels make contact with it, so you'll be spending most of your time struggling to get out of holes. 10 out of 10 for game design, and a similarly high score for bullshit difficulty that just shouldn't be there. No one ever thinks of E.T. as a difficult game, and I'm beginning to think we all should. There's certainly easier games to play out there that weren't developed on a Leapfrog 100 words book.
Sad.
You can see why it didn't catch on and destroyed an entire industry. I don't think they buried it deep enough. Do you know how many sequels out there are virtually unrecognizable from the first game? You might be surprised to know how frequently this happens, and the reason why varies quite dramatically depending on why the sequel looks the way it does. I'm always reminded of how the first Dynasty Warriors is a fighting game where you face off against just one opponent at a time, in stark contrast to the entire crowds of bad guys that you mow down in the many sequels that followed. Hard to argue which type of game is harder, but it's much easier to talk about how stupidly difficult Jak 2 is compared to the original Jak and Daxter. You might remember that Jak 1 is a fairly basic 3D platformer where you jump around collecting objects that are apparently important to your progression through the game, with just a sprinkling of character to help it stand out at a time when 3D platformers were common. We all know that this time didn't last, and Naughty Dog were partly responsible since Jak 2 abandoned a lot of these tropes for an open-world third-person shooter where you can steal cars and Jak can speak for some reason.
Say something! Just this once! Where's that damn 4th Chaos Emerald?
Jak 2 is a very different game to the one that came before, and it's not even the stylistic changes that are among the most prominent. I know a lot of people like this game, and I myself can appreciate a lot of the combat and comedic writing, but it's hard for me to be fully on board when the difficulty is so unnecessarily cruel. I get that this game marks a turn away from the whimsy of Jak 1, complete with a T rating and lots of guns, but I don't think that's a valid excuse for a drastic upturn in difficulty that everyone noticed. Seriously, this is the hardest game in the franchise and everyone knows it. It's not even from some clever bit of game design, since Jak 2 is notorious for its lack of checkpoints and abundance of things that can kill you in one shot, which makes it very hard to appreciate all the entertaining gun combat, because when it comes to some of the more challenging missions, you gotta think business. You can't afford to think about anything other than where the next threat is coming from or how far you are away from the next distant checkpoint, because any complacency is shut down so abruptly that you have to adapt and cling to any progress you do make for dear life. Considering where this franchise came from, this is a bit of a shock to the system. Jack could shout racial slurs all game, and I don't think it'd be as surprising. Please don't do that, Naughty Dog. I admire how well Jak 2 adapts to this completely different style of game, but at the same time, you can tell how inexperienced Naughty Dog were with this kind of game, because before this, they'd just made a bunch of platformers and the occasional RPG for EA, and yet this is now a third-person shooter, and you can tell that they didn't 100% know what they were doing. Still, at no point did any of the devs, anybody working on that dev team think, hey, maybe we should include more checkpoints or less things that kill you in one shot, because you don't have to have worked on a third-person shooter to know that that's just a shitty thing to do. You know, just a bit of mercy is all I ask for. Few games have had me questioning my own place in a deeply indifferent universe as Echo the Dolphin. This is an entire video game that thrives on how easy it is to prejudge what kind of game this is, since a name like Echo the Dolphin calls to mind a whimsical adventure with a bunch of awesome sea creatures, like a two-dimensional Abzu with a similarly zen feel to things. It's just you and the ocean, and the occasional giant tornado that sucks up all marine life, with time travel to help combat the alien invasion. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Echo the Dolphin? It's a bit crazy. Oh well. Ah yes, Echo the Dolphin, the protagonist I would turn to if I needed to stave off some scary looking aliens. He can use all his magic dolphin powers to scare off this giant xenomorph looking motherfucker and restore peace to the aquatic world, but unfortunately, it just ain't that simple. Echo the Dolphin hides a fierce approach to difficulty that you can't really anticipate given the nature of the game, and even though wild events unfold fairly early on, you wouldn't expect them to be accompanied by such an oppressive style of difficulty. To its credit, Echo is consistently hard for most of the game, and once you get into the flow, it's not too harsh, but you can think again if you're hoping to get out of this game without a heavy dose of just the worst thing ever. Welcome to the Machine is the final level before facing the giant head of the alien queen, and this is apparently where the game abandons all pretense of being entertainment and embraces its role as a creative form of psychological torture long since outlawed by the Geneva Convention. It's a 6-minute auto-scroller that rapidly changes direction every few seconds that forces you to memorize the pattern to avoid Echo getting crushed against a wall, and all the while you've got aliens flying across the screen that you often can't avoid without putting yourself out of position for the next direction change. And just why are we being so cruel now? I just want to play a cute game of dolphins. Is that too much to ask for? Is this what SeaWorld's really like? Are they hiding aliens in there? I don't like it. I admire the commitment to Echo being a difficult game, but you've got to know that someone's parent or grandparent bought them this game for Christmas, thinking that it'd be some relaxing swim through a virtual ocean, and hey, it's actually impossible. Sega made 5 of these games over a period of 8 years. Someone had a lot of aggression they needed to work out. Alright, so a lot of people wanted me to make a video about Flash games after the recent discontinuation of Adobe Flash Player. Trust me, I wanted to, but I always thought it'd be a bit of a bittersweet video if I ever discussed all the incredible Flash games that you now can't play in quite the same way as you could in the past. I have very fond memories of playing games online when I should have been paying attention in IT class, and it's bizarre to think that any websites that didn't put an alternative in place are now a bit broken. The only benefit I can think of is it's now a lot trickier to find a working version of Winnie the Pooh's Home Run Derby, which should save you a lot of time that you would otherwise spend slowly realizing the magnitude of the game you're playing. A place where boys become men, and baseball is a death sport spoken of in hushed whispers. The laws of physics have long since abandoned you out of fear of what lies ahead, and the fearless warriors who may oppose them. This is a fairly simple game to explain, but significantly harder to grasp the difficulty of. You play as Pooh, who needs to hit back a certain number of baseballs from each pitcher to progress to a new, trickier pitcher, and this seems perfectly reasonable when you're knocking Eeyores' balls out of the park without breaking a sweat. Hubris is a slow and insidious killer though, and any confidence you may have had is quickly eroded when Rabbit's pitch speeds up in midair, Owl's pitch zigzags across the screen, and Tigger's balls turn invisible during the pitch. These are serious challenges that require you to hit the majority of balls sent your way, but the final challenge is the stuff of legends. The kind of spectacle that makes you think, what the fuck is this? Christopher Robin throws 50 baseballs at you with a random selection of pitches so you can never get into any kind of rhythm, and you have to hit 40 of these to finally topple this monster. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that defeating Chris Robin can take hours for everything to click in your brain, and for that to be something that is the defining feature of a Flash game aimed at kids, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. This is turbo tunnels from Battletoads, but there's no pattern, and you need to be close to perfect for 6 minutes. There is but one that the devil himself would never approach. To face him is to embrace the cold touch of death itself. He must be routed. Disney RabbidLuigi and Winnie the Pooh's Home Run Derby didn't have much publicity until a good 5 years after the game came out, with Japan latching onto it, and then we took it to the West and we just kind of ran with it from there. But all I'm wondering is, what did people think for those first 5 years that apparently didn't need sharing with the rest of the world? Did they get to a certain point where the pitches just become insane and decide, yeah, that's apparently what a Winnie the Pooh game should do? Like, if Dark Souls did something like that, we'd be like, hey, chill the fuck out! Hi, just want to give a quick shout out to some of my top supporters on Patreon. We have Ramon Alberto, Jerome Kiryu, Fusion Warrior, Sarah Malon or Malion, I haven't got that one corrected for me, Christopher Robinson, Joe Creamer, and Scott Riker. Thank you all for supporting what I do on YouTube, and if you want to join them, you can go to patreon.com/RabbidLuigi, where I post updates and behind the scenes stuff, and we generally have a really good time. Also, what topic would you like to see me cover next? Leave your suggestion in a comment on this video, because I'll be taking the best ideas and making a poll on my community tab, which you can then vote on to decide what the next video is about. I'll be announcing the winner of the poll over on my Twitter, so make sure you follow me so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.